So we started Rabosai on Daf Ayin Heyom and Aleph on the second line of the Amud, the Sugya of Rabbi Yehuda Marav. We touched the surface, and today we want to get a little bit more into it. Rabbi Yehuda Marav, Ma'aseh ba'adam echad shenosan eino bisha achas, vehelo libo tina, which he translates as chola b'libo, ubo v'shalu l'rofim, amru ein lo takana ad shetiboylo. Amru chachamim yomos v'al tiboylo. Fine. Then again they asked the Rofim, Tamo l'fanav haruma, and again the Chachamim said, right, and the Rofim advocated Tamod l'fanav haruma, and the Chachamim said Yomos v'al Tamod l'fanav haruma. To sapri imo achori agoder, Yomos v'al sapri imo me'achori agod. Ligi ba Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi v'Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman. Chad Omar Eishes Isha Isa v'Chad Omar Pnuya Isa. Gemara says Bishleim v'Lamandi Omar Eishes Isha Isa Shapir. V'Lamandi Omar Pnuya Isa Maikuli Hai. I mean, it's not Gili Arayas. And then we have another machlokas. Rav Papa Omar Mishum Pgama Mishpacha. Rav Acha Bereid Rav Ikamar Kadesh Lo Yu Benos Yisrael Prutzos Barayos. And then at the end we have the sugya of Lechem Sisarim Yinam. Okay, we'll get to that later. So we began last time by discussing the question of the Rofim, whether the Rofim are reliable here, because initially they said Achati Boilo, and then they sort of backtracked and they said Tamad Alof Aruma, and then finally Tzapri Momechori Agode. Okay, so we're going to take a look at footnote number Hey. He says here on the third line, Hagemara hevia ma'aseh zeh, rak b'shvil lilmod mimenu es chomer din yehag val yavor be'arayos. Ulefichach lo hericha b'fratav, v'af lo kosva ma'ola b'sofo shel oso odom. So he's pointing out here that the entire story here of Ma'aseh b'adam echad shel libatino, etc. It's not just for the horah of that particular case, but rather this should be seen in a broader context of harayos as far as Yehorig Val Yavar is concerned. Right, we had Yehorig Val Yavar in harayos. And we said that in a case of arayos, we're machmir like ritzicha, goes to the equation to ritzicha. It doesn't matter whether it's befarhesia or betzina, whether it's b'shas hashmad, shelo b'shas hashmad. And then we had a concept called avizrayu. And we saw with regard to Avizrayu that, let's say in the case of Avodah Zarah, for example, if you're dealing with, let's say, being nene from a cheftz of Avodah Zarah, like an Asherah, where they worship the Asherah, so that could be considered Avizrayu to Avodah Zarah. So we had the case of a person who was ill, and he would need to use Avodah Zarah to save his life, and we said that it's prohibited because it's Avodah Avodah Zarah. Now we're getting on to the issue of Avodah Zarah, the Gili Arayis, and the story takes on another element of expanding the definition of Gili Arayis to include even Talmud L'fanav Aruma and even Saper Imo Me'achorei Agada. And it's interesting how he proves this. I thought that was pretty sweet. He says, well, why didn't they tell us the end of the story? You know, if you're telling a story, at least give us the end line in the story. What happens at the end? Now he quotes the Chidah. He says, as a Rashi earlier in Masechet Sanhedrin Adaf Lamed Aleph Amid Beis, and Rashi says they found a story in a Sefer Haggadah. I guess they had Sefer Tzfarim for Haggadah. Shehutzucho lelavos mimena. Not sure the details here. We might have to look that up in order to understand this. Okay, so I guess there's a Sefer Haggadah that tells us a story which Rashi refers to about someone who overcame his choli, and even though she was willing to have a relationship with him, he sent her home. And as a reward for him doing so and not having this immoral relationship, he was misrapi micholia. And in there, doluk min hashamayim, dolik al rosho, shiotzel l'shuk, Rabbi Nosan, tzutzis al shema or, fine. So who is that man, an anonymous person, about which the entire Haggadah gives us this whole story? And I guess it's this man over here who's in our Gemara coming to ask the question whether or not he's allowed this, that, and the other thing. Fine. Oh, so then we had footnote number Ches, which we studied Ba'arichus, in which we had three shitos here. We had the Chavas Yair. He was of the opinion that Li'achash lo itiru chachamim, since initially after the Rofim said Tiboilo and the Chachamim would not permit that, the Rofim said maybe we could try something else. And we go down a madrig. The Ochlaner, on the other hand, says that the whole story, the whole approach to the Rofim was all built on sheker, and that which they said that he won't live, he won't survive unless he has a relationship with her, that was sheker. They saw that they weren't getting away with this sheker, the Rofim, so they came back and said, all right, let's try this, let's try that. And then we had finally the Ein Yaakov, and he was of the opinion that the Rofim said the first statement that it would have to be a relationship, and then Chazal said, well, you know what? Even had the Rofim theoretically told us that it wouldn't necessarily require a Maisa Be'ila, we still would have prohibited it. Oh, now he has the Metzudas David, that this was an issue of L'chai Shah. Yo'ilu lo gam dvarim ele, aval atzol gemura isalo k'lutin frame chak v'bilos. In other words, the Ein Yaakov is not going to cast a doubt about the Rofim and what their motivations are. And the Metzudas David goes even further, that the Rofim were trying to see if they could at least extend his life. And then if you go to Chavis Yoyer, the Rofim said, you know what, maybe it might work if we try something different. I don't know, we don't know. And then we have, on the other side of the equation, the sheet of the Aruch LaNer, that the Rofim were full of hogwash, so to speak, from the beginning. It was all predicated on sheker. Okay, so that's, I think, where we got up to last time. Now we want to know, what is the definition of Avizrayu de Gilia Rayis, and does it apply even in the case of a non-married woman? So we're going to look now at footnote number tes. And he quotes the Balamar, Shegam alav Izrayu shel Arayos, right? Because the Gemara starts with Eishes Isha. And it seems like, as far as Eishes Ish, the Gemara was very, very satisfied with the entire mahalach of the story. And in the case of an Eishes Ish, the Chacham wouldn't even allow him to speak to her me'achorei hagader, because that's called Avizrayu de Gilia Rayos. But then if the story took place with a Pnuya, which is only a Takanas Chachamim, which is called Shelo Yu Benos Yisrael Prutzas Bar Rayos. So it sounds like, according to Balamor, we're no longer within the purview of Gilia Rayos and Avizrayu de Gilia Rayos once we move on to Pnuya. And that's a separate takana that the Chachamim instituted, Shelo Yu Benos Yisrael Prutzas Bar Rayos. And the Chacham apparently have the authority to implement such a takana even at the expense of human life, which has to be understood, but that's he says the following. Why is it that Dibur Me'achorei HaPargod, again, the Gemara initially thought it was an Eishes Ish, that itself would qualify for Avizrayu de Gilia Rayos? After all, you could call it a lav of Lo Sikravu Legalos Erva. Maybe it's a lav of Kreva La Rayos. But even so, even if I were to tell you that Kreva La Rayos should be categorized and qualifies as Avizrayu de Gilia Rayos, but nevertheless, that's only Kiruv Basa. But here it's only Lisaper imo me'achori agoder. Where's the kiruv to an erva here? Where's the violation lo sikruvu legalos erva? He says an amazing chiddush here. Mikol makom, he says, Kevon shenosan ba enov, right? He was so passionate about this woman, whatever. Vayanena be also dibur, he would get some sort of, I guess, psychological pleasure by speaking to her. Afu b'chlal of Israel. This also qualifies as Av Israel. So we now have three levels. We've got Gili Arayis, and then we have Av Israel de Gili Arayis, which would be Kiruv Basar, and then we have something called not a violation of Lo Sikravu, but a special Hana that he gets from the Erva. And if he has that Hana from the Erva, that itself makes it into Av Israel, even without a violation of Lo Sikravu. In other words, we would have said that Lo Sikravu applies to any lav that doesn't generate on the highest level Misa, but it's a lav within that constellation of that Isur. But at least it's got to be a lav. There's got to be some violation of a lav, Lo Sikravu, Legalis Erev. And now we're saying no. Even Hana, which can be defined as Hana Mi'arayos, is prohibited and comes under Av Israel Avodah Zarah. Now, when it says Hana Mi'arayos, again, it's got to be a specific type of Hana. He describes it as Kevan Shenosan Enov Ba. Doesn't mean that if a married woman is a cashier at a supermarket and she gives me change from my 50 shekel piece, that therefore I was nene from an Eishes Ish. And that's called Av Israel to Gilearais. No. We're talking about Hana Asura from an Erva, in this case an Eishes Ish, because of Nosan Enova. So Nosan Enova makes this particular pleasure into a pleasure from an Erva. Varadbaz Vatosus Yom Kippurim Dachu es Rayosa Shel Balamor v'Kosu Shekan Ichmiro Lov Yoser Me'asher Al Kol Av Israel Mishum Shekol HaCholi Ba Rak Machmas HaAvera. I think what he's saying is the following. There are two ways of understanding this din of Yeharg Val Yavar in the case of Eishes Ish who Masaper Imo Me'achorei Agodim. One way is to say, well, that's called Av Israel de Gili Arayis. And why? Even though there's no violation of Lo Sikravu, but once it was Nosan Einov, but he's having Hana from the Erva, that particular type of Hana, so that makes it into, in the expanded scope definition of Av Israel. That's the way the Balamar understood Agamar. And now, the Radbaz and the Tosas Yom Kippur say, no. The Yehard Val Yavar here is not based on Av Israel, meaning if they're talking to the Balamor, they're saying you can't prove that because he's having Hana from this Erva, that particular type of Hana, it becomes Av Israel and Yehard Val Yavar. No. It's not just the Hana that he has that makes it into Av Israel. You need what's called Choli. The Choli here injects a whole different element into the equation. So, for example, we said Hakol Misrap Mechutz Miatzi Ashera. We said that there was a separate halacha that Latzolas Atzmo Min Avera, that's awesome. You can't be matzel yourself through the Avera, in this case, the Avera of Avodah Zarah. And now the Radbaz and the Tosim, they're arguing that here too we're talking about a case of Bakol Misrapim Chutz Mihana Me'arayos. That if his refuah and his hatzolah is dependent upon the hana that he gets from the erva, then we apply the principle of Yehar Gal Yav. Meaning, if a normal person, let's say they put a gun in his head and say, well, you have to talk to this Eishes Ish, Me'achorei Apargod, and you'll have Hana from that, and so forth and so on. I don't know that would come under Vav Israel if he's a normal person under normal circumstances, and he'd have to give up his life. No. Our case is very unique because it comes under the halach of misrapim. And as we said, the din is that you can't be matzel atzmo with a violation of, in that case, of atzei asher of hanomi avodah zarah, and in this case of yisaper mechovav hana from an erva. To save your life by having hana from an erva, which comes under the general rubric of isurei erva, give you a right, that you can't do. But if somebody would have forced you at gunpoint to this kind of saper imo me'achorei agoder, and you're a normal person, then there's no. It's not necessarily so that you'd have to give up your life for that, because it's not necessarily so that it's called Av Israel Dekili. Now, the only problem I have here is the language. I'm not sure if what I said fits into the language, because he says, Kol hacholi ba machmas avera. I'm reading into it, but I think what he means is that hatzolah me'acholi ba machmas avera. I mean, the fact that the choli itself is because of the avera, I don't know what that means or why that should be significant. Now he writes in the name of the Chavas Yair the second time today that we're doing a Chavas Yoyer. Sha'afim ein din yarek v'yam Rav Izrayu, shalom and din ichmiro. Ein kushal dibri ha'gemar shemeish si shaisa muvan maduach miracle kach mishum she'iser atzmo zanos emeish ish avon plili admi o. L'chein ichmiru ba'avodah zora be've'av Izrayu yosim and adin. You see, the key words here in the Chavas Yoyer are the words Shalom and Adin Ichmiru ba. He's saying that there are Bonon are more motivated to be machmir, shalom and adin, in the case of Gilead Rayas, because of the severe nature of that Isa, the Chumas Haveri. But the Balamor has no proof that there's a din of Yeharig Val Yavar in Avizrayo de Gilead Rayas, because here we're saying Shalom and Adin Ichmiru. If it would have been Minadin, then you see from this that the Yeharig Val Yavar applies in Avizrayo de Gilead Rayas. But if it's Shalom and Adin, and that's why the Gemara was arguing that why would there Rabbanan machmir Shalom and Adin? If she was a Pnuya, then we don't understand that. If she was an Eishes, we could understand it, because then you have the Avera Chamura of Gilead Rayas with an Eishes, and therefore they were machmir Kulei Haifa of Israel. But again, they were machmir Shalom and Adin. I think that's the main point over here. And then the Gemara basically answers, well, look, man, if you're telling me that she was an Eishes and they were machmir Shalom and Adin, then I can tell you that she's a Pnuya and they were machmir Shalom and Adin. The only thing is that, if they were machmir Shalom and Adin in the case of an Eishes, that's because of the Chumas Avera of Eishes. In the case of Pnuya, why would they be so machmir Shalom and Adin and this guy's going to die when we're not talking about Gilead Rayas? That was the Gemara's question. Now, if we accept the Bandiyama that she was a Pnuya, so what Iser is involved in? So in footnote number Yud, he points out that according to the Rambam, you're talking about the lav of Losia Kedesha. Again, that's if he would consummate a relationship with her. And the Ravid says no. There's no lav of Kedesha unless she's mufkeres lakol. She's, that's what she does for a profession. But in any event, even according to the Rambam, that's a violation of a lav of Kedeshus, but it's not Gilead Rayas. So Rav Papa says Mishum Pgam Mishpacha. So what does this mean, Pagam Mishpacha? I guess it's some sort of blemish in the family's reputation if she does this or does that. But I mean, for that reason, we let the guy die. I don't know. And furthermore, if you take a look at the Aruch LaNer here in Abi Yud Aleph, he says, "What's the Pagam Mishpacha because of Dibur Bialma?" Okay, she's talking to this guy Me'achorei Agadar. It's not the most sneistic, it's not the proper behavior, but that's called Pagam Mishpacha. So Aruch LaNer says that according to Rav Papa, we're talking about Be'ila Mamish. I don't know how you work that into the Lashon of the Shas. But I guess this is the Aruch LaNer Lishitaso, he's being consistent. And remember, the Aruch LaNer said that all the secondary fallback hatzaot of the Rofim, that was all sheker v'chazal. So when they said, Talmud in front of Aruma or Tzapri Machorei Gorek, that's all sheker v'chazal. That's nothing. But the Be'ila, that could possibly save his life, but we're not going to do that because of Pagam Mishpacha. Oh, V'tzarech Bir. Very good. Madua Boshes B'nei HaMishpacha who siba litchos is chaya. Okay, there's a certain, shall we say, sacrifice of reputation, a blemish on the reputation, but that's enough to let a guy die. And we're not talking about an Eishes Ish, we're talking about a Pnuya. So we're not talking about Gilei Arayos. So he quotes from Shlomo Kluger, the Chochmah Shlomo. Zokein she'ein atzol lefi chvodo poter mimenu. Now, if I understand this correctly, the mitzvah of Hatzalah does not override Kavod Abrios. And therefore, Zaken, who in order to save someone's life would have to lower his kavod, and it's Eino Lefi Chvodo, he's potter for the mitzvah Hatzalah. So I just want to make two comments. Comment number one, I find this a very uncomfortable halachic ruling. I'm not comfortable. Eino Lefi Chvodo. And you remember the Gemara we had once about a Chassid Shota, he refuses to jump into the water to save a woman's life because he'll have to touch her in order to bring her back to shore. And the Gemara calls him a Chassid Shota. Hatzol is Hatzol. The Mishnah says that Kol Hamatzol Nefesh Achas Misro Kilu Hitzel Kol Olam Kula. So I understand Kavod Abrios is a very big thing, but therefore, I mean, again, he's not killing anybody for Kavod Abrios, but he's Shevi Altas and he's not getting involved in Hatzol. But secondly, this is my real problem here, is Reb Shlomo Kluger saying that the Chachamim would have allowed her to participate, meaning if it's only an issue of Pagam Mishpacha and Kavod Abrios, okay, a Zaken, for example, could waive his Kavod Abrios and save someone's life, even if the Hatzol is below his dignity. But now I'm thinking about it a second time. Maybe that's not so terrible. Maybe that's exactly what's going on over here. That Mishum Kamishpacha, meaning the choice. We throw the ball into the lap of the Pnuya, and we'll ask her. Although that's not the impression you get. Yomus v'al tamod l'fanav haruma. Yomus v'al tiboil. Then he quotes the Kli Chemda, Shevadei ein p'tur hatzol b'zoken. A zoken can't say, well, I'm not going to save someone because it's below my dignity. And are you disturbed like I am by this drilling noise, or you don't even hear it? Yeah, you hear it. Yeah, next door. I mean, the apartments are separated by one wall, so I'm assuming he's drilling this wall. Again, the language of Einam Chayovim, as if to say that they could waive their rights. The Afegros Moshe Kosev Shevadai Ein Busha Docha Atzols Nefesh MiYisrael V'kan Osu Mishum Shapagam Hanigram B'Maisa Pritzus L'Dvar Ervo Nosei Lo Shem Arayos L'Achar Shekain Shmo Asur Mishum of Israel Shel Arayos. All right, so I'm not exactly sure what he means over here. All right, we're going to stop here because of the very difficult here. Okay, then? All right, so have a great day.